Now, the clan was how Chinese society was organized for centuries. When I went to, in South China, I was in a village where almost everyone had the last name of He, H-E or H-O in Cantonese, Ho. And there were 5,000 people, all with the same surname. And they were all descended from the same first ancestor who'd settled that village during the Tang Dynasty over 1,000 years before. And they had genealogies thicker than this, listing all of the descendants of the first ancestor, generation by generation. Didn't list the women. You see, the women married out. The women didn't count because this was a very patriarchal society and patrilineal. Patrilineal, you only track the father's line. You don't track the mother's line. And each branch of the clan had its own clan temple where they worshipped the ancestors, because they did believe in life after death. They did believe the ancestors could help them and they could help the ancestors. That was a big controversy, of course, when Catholicism came to China. The question was, what was called ancestor worship, was it simply memorializing the ancestors in the way that we go to the tombs of our ancestors and pray over them and give them flowers? Or was it worshiping the ancestors as some kind of superior godlike being? If my grandmother in heaven is a saint, can I not, as I would to any saint, pray to her and ask for her intercession? Debate went on for centuries, finally resolved in favor of allowing the Chinese to memorialize their ancestors in this way. But that question did slow conversions in China for about 200 years, because the Chinese were first asked to burn their ancestral tablets, to cut all ties with their ancestors when they accepted Christianity. And that was a major, major hurdle. Where was I? The Chinese family. So, in China, there was no public sense. There was no common sense of a common humanity, because that comes from Christianity. We don't realize how much we owe to Christianity in terms of the elevation of women, the elevation of the status of the family, and a sense that one has a common humanity with all men and all women, regardless of race, color, or creed. In China in the old days, you know, you could be crossing a river on a ferry, and if someone fell in, no one would dive in to save them. They would simply let them drown, unless that person who fell in the water had a friend or family member on board who would then risk their life. I can't imagine that happening in this country. If someone is in trouble, then people oftentimes will stop and help. That doesn't happen in China because there's no sense of common humanity. The humanity is limited to the extent of one's clan, one's place, one's immediate family. Of course, that's changing now rapidly with modernization, with industrialization, with the rampant materialism you see in China today, where people are more interested in acquiring a motorcycle, a car, or a TV set, or DVD than they are in having children. The one-child policy has been prosecuted with great vigor in China, and force has had to be used, and still has to be used in the countryside to enforce the rules. In the cities, however, things are changing. In Shanghai, the birth rate is already below replacement, has been for some time. And many years ago now, the head of family planning in Shanghai said at one point, she said, you know, it's getting very difficult for me to give these quotas, these child quotas, to young couples because they don't want to have any children. And she said, as difficult as it was 20 years ago when the one-child policy began, to stop everybody from having more than one child, she said, I can see it's going to be even more difficult in the future to force people to have their one child when they don't want any. So that's materialism. And Chinese society, as a result of materialism and urbanization, is becoming atomized like societies everywhere, where the individual is the only yardstick, is the only ruler by which all things are measured. That, of course, that very atomization creates a sense of alienation and provides an opportunity for the spread of Christianity, which reconnects you not just to your fellow man, of course, but to God the Father. You know, and we have to understand this. We think of China and many countries around the world as being family-oriented cultures, and we have this notion that we in the United States are rugged individualists. But surveys have shown that when you ask people around the world what the primary organizing principle of society ought to be. That only about 15% of people in China say the family. About half say the government should be the primary organizing principle of society. What do we say? About 2/3 of us say the family should be the primary organizing unit of society. So we are one of the most family-oriented cultures in the world, and I think that's as it should be, because the domestic church is very important. I write books, among other things, and if you're interested in how China might try to invade Taiwan, this is basically a war game scenario that Chuck DeVore and I wrote into a novel. So it's a Tom Clancy techno-thriller. It's actually a good read, even if I do say so myself. My son is back there reading it for the 4th time. and Chuck is actually a tank driver with the California National Guard and a California State Assemblyman, so he's a politician as well. But so he wrote the land battles and I wrote the naval battles. But it's an interesting account.
Question. Are you aware that recent announcement by a Chinese archaeologist that he believes that Christianity came to China early in the Han Dynasty?
Oh, I think Christian missionaries went everywhere. Yeah, I don't know about any.
The legends about St. Thomas are maybe supported.
Oh, I've been to India. You see, India is where St. Thomas wound up. He wound up in a cave above the city of Madras, which we now call Chennai, in the southeast coast. And there, the cathedral there is dedicated to St. Thomas, and his relics are in the cathedral. He spent apparently the last 20 years of his life there. The cave where he lived, the cave of St. Thomas, where he was martyred. So the early Christians, the ones that the Portuguese missionaries found when they went to India, were the spiritual descendants of St. Thomas. I don't know that St. Thomas, is it said that St. Thomas also got to China?
I think China came back to India.
Oh. Well.
But there are stones carved with images and so forth. Interpreted as contracted by a wealthy aristocrat.
Yeah.
Reflecting his Christian conversion.
See, Confucianism was the state religion of China for centuries. And there was a little bit of Buddhism here and there among the popular folk, but Confucianism was the state religion, like Shintoism in Japan. And it had no supernatural aspects at all. It was simply a state religion that emphasized the fact that the emperor was a deity, that the people were his children, and that it reinforced the social order. It was a religion invented by man, or one might say by the devil, to reinforce the authority of the state. And when you ask Confucius, one of his sayings, he was asked once about spirits, and he said, "Oh, I respect them, but I keep them at a distance." There's no reference to the hereafter. It's all about the here and now. Because it was a state religion, enforced by the state, other religions were not allowed to organize and to spread as freely as they otherwise would have.